How much have you got there?
So let the sun shine in. Say, boys and girls, we try to let the sun shine in every afternoon at 3 o'clock on TX television. This window will be occupied by P.J. Possum, Lord Grey Monkey, and Dillingham the dinosaur. So be sure to look for us at 3, the Uncle Elihu Show.
Face it with a grin. Open up your heart and let the sun shine in.
Elihu had his beginning in the latter 40s. I had a program on KWTX radio at 6:50 in the morning. And so every morning I wrote a script that had the sponsors involved in some dialogue. But then in the early 50s, I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I had in mind I wanted to put Elihu on TV. And so I had a hat that I had used in going to Washington. We had a hearing there to gain television for Waco, and I was part of that hearing. So I bought this good felt hat to go to Washington. Well, I put the hat under a steam kettle and made it misshapen as much as I could. And I went to the University of Mexico and asked them if they could give me some crepe hair, which they did. So I made mustache and sideburns with the crepe hair that they showed me how to put together. They were very accommodating. When I was in Albuquerque, I had a ukulele, and I learned these 1 or 2 songs to put on this television show. And they were very simple chords, and that's about all I could pick up because I never played an instrument. But the young artist there said, Elihu said, I have a ukulele that was in my grandfather's attic. And if you would like to trade this battery-operated little car, I had a toy sponsor out there, and he liked that toy. It was a little remote control, even back then. He said, I'll trade this ukulele with you. And I said, you've got yourself a deal. And so we traded, and that's how Elihu got the ukulele that he carried throughout the years. But then when Waco came on with TV on Channel 10, of course, that was my hometown. And I contacted Mr. Buddy Bostic and said I had this show. And I showed him a bit of it, and he said, we'll hire you. Now, Elihu came on TV without any set. And P.J. Possum, which was Elihu's sidekick, was only a possum and hung P.J. on the back of this rocking chair. And he didn't say anything for a long while until I got someone to be P.J. And I found Dick Clayton in the film room, and I asked him if he'd like to be on television and be P.J. Possum. And he said yes, and so there we went. And then we had a nice set that they produced for us. And soon after, Dick Clayton went to California with his own puppet show, and Bryce Armstrong was in the film room then. So I asked Bryce, how would you like to be P.J. Possum? And luckily for all of us, Bryce said yes. And he was an anchor. He was a center part of that show as long as it was on the air. And people just loved the character that he made P.J. Possum become.
Since I was doing the puppet, I wanted to do more at the station. I felt like I belonged there. I ended up working in the film room, which consisted of working with a tele-op machine. I am now so old that when I tell people I used a tele-op machine, they don't know what I'm talking about. The Broadcast Museum in Dallas has a tele-op machine, but nobody there knows how it works because that is in the dim, dark past. We're talking 50-some-odd years ago. But worked with slides and 16-millimeter film and so on and so forth. It was not exciting work, but it kept me at the station and kept me fed, as it turned out. PJ was, when I came in, the puppet was already there. I took it over. To give you an idea, this is, I believe this was PJ before I got there.
How do you do? It's good to see you, kid. Want a possum grin?
Possum grin consisted of, which Uncle Elihu then encouraged kids to slip in their pocket, and then when they needed a grin, they had it.
We had the possum grinners. We had an upstairs viewing room that had glass along the entire wall to where the viewers could look down into the studio and watch the show. we called that the chicken roost. And we called the people up there chicken roosters. And then at one point in the show, we made chicken roosters into possum grinners. And we sang this song, which a friend of mine, her name was Nanan Lustig, Mrs. Joe Lustig, wrote this song for the show. Oh, if you want a possum grin, step right up and come right in. Put your finger on the PJ's chin and give yourself a possum grin. A possum grinner is a sunshine winner. Doesn't matter if you're just a beginner. Step right up and come right in and get yourself a possum grin.
Delicious. Yay! Thank you, Uncle Elihu.
And the chicken roosters would line up in the studio, and sometimes we would have 60 or 80 of them on a day. And let me say this, which I'm very proud of, there was no racial discrimination. The African American families understood that this show belonged to everybody, and they put their young people in that line with everyone else. And no one complained about that. It just was done, and was done easily and with ease and comfortably. So all of these little kids would come up, and we would have them give their name on camera. And of course, that was a big deal for the families back at home. And then they would put their finger under PJ's chin, and he would give them a possum grin. And then they would step off the stage, and the next person would come up. But that was a part of the show. We had serials like we had Little Rascals and other film that we used. And of course, Young Wes joined us very soon at the beginning. And he was the person that appealed to a broader age. And he did a great job in singing country songs and interchange with PJ and with Uncle Elihu. And Young Wes was a real addition to that show.
The TV station had been on the air, I guess, 2 or 3 months. And a friend of mine by the name of Hillary McDonald was working as a cameraman up there. And the summer before, my wife and her sister and myself, we did a radio show for KWTX for Buddy Bostic, and in the summer. And the girls, it was the Diamond Twins, were Ramona and Winona. And I played the guitar, and they sang. So, from the way I've always understood this, someone said something about having a guy come on the Elihu show that would pick the guitar along with him and sing little songs and do whatever might be necessary. And Hillary come down one afternoon to the shop, and he said, Mr. Bostic wants to see you about doing this television show. So I think I went up the next day with a guitar, and we sang a little song or two. And I did the show that afternoon and did it for 3 years running.
One of the interesting things about this show is everybody assumes that we were scripted. We were not. We were formatted to the extent that Bob had a maybe 5x7 sheet of paper tacked to the inside of the porch railing, which said, opening, Wes sings, Popeye cartoon, and just a basic format of what went where, which commercial, and so on and so forth.
We went on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and generally somewhere around 2 or 3, we would get together, and if we were going to do a little song together, and every once in a while we would do songs together. So we would get together and go over the song, or maybe 2 or 3 times, just to make sure that we just didn't do it really cold, you know. And it worked out better that way. I'd do songs. We'd try to do, I know PJ still kids me about it today, we'd do The Wayward Wind, which was a popular song at that time. And we tried to keep the songs within the context of a children's program, something that the children could identify with, and still, you know, make it entertaining song. And sometimes that became a real chore, because of the popular songs, even of that day, were not very appropriate, I guess the word might be. At any rate, we would do folk songs, Burl Ives type songs. I mean, we used to do Blue Tail Fly and stuff like that. Lots of songs, lots of little songs. Elihu and I would sing together. And then every so often we'd do a little something, and I did something by myself.
We had a part that we called Get Well Quickers. But if a young person was ill, had measles, mumps, the flu, or whatever, they would let us know. We would call their name on the air, and we would sing the Get Well Quicker song, and then we would all shout, "Get well quicker." And so it gave some of the ill young people some attention.
So let the sun shine in, face it with a grin. Smilers never lose, and flowers never win. So let the sun shine in, face it with a grin. Open up your heart and let the sun shine in.
Then we had a section called the Funny Phoners. Elihu had an old crank-type phone that was on the set. And this was connected directly to the switchboard. So Elihu would tell Mabel, the switchboard operator, what number he wanted, and she would plug us in. So we could talk to anybody in the country. Elihu talked to Mr. Green Jeans, who was a sidekick of Captain Kangaroo.
And I talked to Audie Murphy on the Funny Phoners one time. And I believe Murphy was coming in to be at the Heart of Texas Fair. And we interviewed, it was supposed to be an interview, if you want to call it an interview. Anyway, we talked to him over the phone. And that's my, I guess you'd say that's my best experience with the Funny Phoners, was talking to Audie Murphy.
One day we had Rin Tin Tin on the show. And Johnny Mac Brown, who was his caretaker on the show, had the handler, and the little puppy came along. We had Lord Gray Monkey, which Bryce Armstrong had on his second hand. He had two hands. If he had three hands, we'd have three puppet characters. But he had PJ on one hand and Lord Gray Monkey on the other.
Lord Gray Monkey came into existence because one day during a production meeting, it amazes me we had production meetings since we never formatted anything, really. One of the gentlemen, whose name is now lost to history, tossed me a small black monkey puppet and said, "See what you can do with this." And I said, "Well, this is Lord Gray Monkey, of course." I was working on the fact that in the Tarzan books, he actually is Lord Greystoke. And since he was a lord, I gave him an English accent. But because he's a puppet, he became a Cockney. So,
Oh, hello, Gov. How's it going?
none of the children over the years ever got the reference. They all called him Large Gray Monkey, although he was a small black monkey with the dangling tail, which Rin Tin Tin so obviously adored.
But the handler for Rin Tin Tin instructed this big dog to attack this monkey. And so Lord Gray Monkey was in the jaws of Rin Tin Tin in no time. It was very slight, and I don't think Bryce was harmed, but for a while it looked like Lord Gray Monkey was in real danger. But that was an extemporaneous thing. We really didn't have too many mishaps. It was fairly carefully well done by the whole staff.
We did one thing I'll never forget. I believe it was Bob's idea. It was the most bizarre thing ever in a kid show because we were always very careful and very cautious. Johnny Watkins had a large area behind the station. If you open the huge double metal doors at the end of the station, you can see this large pile of acreage called 10 acres, of course, in which he grew crops every year and had the cameras out there showing this and that and the other piece of equipment, this and that and the other seeds and so on and so forth. One day, Elihu had somebody come running in carrying a bomb. And Elihu leapt up, Wes leapt up. I came running out the door carrying PJ as if I were a courier. The three of us raced out, the camera followed us, as we disappeared into the distance at 10 acres, fade to black, and the next day's show starts with a shot of the doors open and 3 little specks coming closer and closer to the camera. We raced by the camera onto the set. There's a loud explosion, a flash of light, then silence and darkness. Then the camera opens up on the floor, slowly pans up. Wes is draped over the railing. Elihu is sprawled back in his chair. In PJ's window, all you see is my right arm dangling out. And then, of course, a Popeye cartoon. And when we came back, everything was all right. I don't think any children's program before or since has done something as bizarre as that.
The This and That and Bacon Pat was a colloquialism almost, but I worked it into the show. And it still remains in Waco. If you go out there at the TV station with some of the old people, they will say this and that and bacon pat, which means, I don't know what to call it. So we'll just call it this and that and bacon pat. Young West will tell you we had a Young West secret code with a Possum Grinners Club card, and the keys were this, that, bacon, and fat. So we would give numbers out each day and let them know what was going to be happening the next day, but they had to have the card to have the code.
A girl wrote in, yeah, Wes got a lot of letters from girls in those days. And she said, do you ever have any adventures? So Wes and I said, let's have an adventure. My sister Lucky worked the camera for us. I had an old 16mm Bell & Howell. In those days it was a new Bell & Howell. We went up to Cameron Park in Waco and shot about 2 minutes worth of Young West adventure. We had limited funds. We had no funds. We had to borrow the stock film from the station. So Wes, narrating the story, explains that he's following Black Bart, who robbed the bank, and was getting up into treacherous country and had to leave the horse behind, which means we didn't have to have horses for Black Bart or for Wes. And we see Wes walking through with his cowboy regalia, and Black Bart, an ugly brute of a man, turning and firing a gun at Wes.
And I have this 45 looking pistol. May have been a real 45. And I pop up over this tree limb or the log, and I pop up over it and I'm firing a gun, and then I duck down. Well, in between the firing and the ducking, you're firing and the ducking, that's pretty good. Bryce had a real weapon, and he would shoot at the top of that log, and the bark would fly off of it. You could tell it was hit by a bullet. Of course, I'm out of there. And then I'd get back in there and get behind that tree again, and I'd pop up and shoot. By the time they edited it, well, it looks like that I'm down behind this log. Somebody's shooting at me, and about the time as soon as they have fired, well, then I pop up and I shoot.
There are 3 or 4 shots, and Wes knocks the gun from the guy's hand because, like Hopalong Cassidy, Wes would never actually shoot anybody, but he will discern them. And then Wes proceeds to give the scoundrel the beating of his life. Now, initially, I took some chocolate syrup. This is black and white TV, you recall. And at the last pummeling, I let some chocolate syrup drip down the side of my chin. And Bob was properly dismayed. He said, this is a children's program. We don't bleed on children's programs. So we refilmed the fight. And then ran it one day with Wes doing the narration, and I'd bought a little .22 caliber starter pistol, about yay big. So I fired at the proper time for the shots, and then for the punches. And with Wes's narration, that was a West adventure. And several days later, a 13-year-old girl wrote and said, that was wonderful. I think you should make it into a full motion picture.
I got a letter from a girl, it must have been from Marlin, or something like Mart, somewhere in that area. And she said something to the effect that, well, we really do like you, young Wes. You're real gone, gassed, and groovy. And these people, my wife especially, has she's teased me about that for years. And ever so often, we'll be getting ready to go somewhere. And, I'll ask her, I'll say, do Do you think I look all right? And she said, well, you're real gone, gassed, and groovy. I said, well, I guess I'm looking okay then.
Bob went on a one-week vacation, and Wes and I are there. And this is the closest we ever came to having a plot, I think, on the show. We thought, what are we going to do with Bob? So we got the art department to make us a large cardboard bottle. And we pasted a picture of Elihu on it like this. And then the situation was we couldn't get Elihu out of the bottle. So it'd be,
Help, fellas. Help there. Yeah.
and every so often we'd be doing something and then cut back to the bottle, and Bob would say,
Now, time for another Popeye cartoon. Yes.
so we did this for the week he was gone.
At the beginning, we were pretty popular. And so we had to be pretty careful as to what we said and how we said it. And we determined that it would be a family-oriented program to where the parents could leave the young kids in front of the TV set and never have to worry about anything being obtrusive or unneighborly.
We did a lot of funny things that were designed to hook the mamas and papas who may have to watch some kid show with the kid. But if we could toss in something for them, they might prefer us over another. Example was a little boy came up whose name he announced was Milton. And PJ became very agitated and said,
Oh, it's just terrible news. Poor Milton has lost the dice from his Monopoly set. Everybody write that down. Milton's Paradise Lost.
this was the sort of thing PJ was capable of doing. And I think it worked because he was so silly, the kids just saw the silly, and the grown-ups caught the little strange lines. But the little boy came in one day and just so excited to be there, couldn't say anything, so he held up. He was wearing a little dress shirt. He said, PJ, see my cufflinks? And to this day, I think of cufflinks as cufflinks because it's very nice and sweet and rite of passage, your first grown-up stuff, cufflinks.
Well, let's see. Here's a little song called I only want a buddy, not a sweetheart, for buddies never make you blue. Sweethearts make vows that are broken like my heart is broken too.
During the show, of course, we had a lot of sponsor participation. And Elihu was basically a commercial character because he understood that if you don't have sponsors, you don't have the support you need for the show. So we had some good sponsors, and we worked those into the show to where they became a part of it. One was Triple X Root Beer. And so we would sing the song, Triple X Root Beer, that's the drink for me.
Extra goodness, extra flavor, extra quality. Triple X Root Beer, that's the drink for me.
And then we would, of course, drink Triple X on the show.
Just about every Triple X Root Beer commercial we did, one of the floor crew would hand me a Triple X Root Beer. And Elihu would say something about, take a swallow of that, Young West, or Young West, take a big drink of that root beer and see how good it is, or something like that. So I'd take a drink of it and say, boy, that is good, huh? I love this stuff. Well, Sonny Walker was one of the cameramen. Marvel Russell had a kitchen set back over in the other corner with a working refrigerator in it. So we kept this stuff in, kept it cool. We didn't have to drink a hot root beer. Well, every once in a while, Walker would take a cap off of that root beer, pour it out, and fill it full of Dr. Pepper. And they'd put the cap back on. Well, of course, when they came over, handed me the soda water, the cap was already off. So I take a big drink out of this Triple X root beer, and it's Dr. Pepper. But I couldn't, and the minute I'm tasting it, I know what's going on. I can't let it show on my face. It's going to ruin the commercial. So they pulled that trick 2 or 3 times. And I think we got through it every time. I don't ever remember being reprimanded for making a face or saying, "Oh gosh, that's Dr. Pepper."
Now the result of that was that XXX was moved into all of the 7-Eleven stores because people came in wanting XXX root beer and no other root beer. And so it was a good thing for the sponsor. Another was Wholesome Bread, which was known as Uncle Elihu's bread, because we did a lot of that. We said, don't squeeze the Wholesome, and we would tell them, don't squeeze that bread. Another was fairly much of a challenge was the moving company, the Allied Van Lines Company. Now, how are you going to make that appealing to the young people? So we said this: if you know of someone who's going to move in your neighborhood, send us a card and tell us who it is, and we will send you an Allied Van Line agent badge. And this was a little cloth badge that they could put on their shirt or their cap. And we made them an Allied Van Lines agent. Well, the result was that sponsor knew before any other moving company who was going to move. So they were knocking on the doors first. And it worked out very well.
Lilly, Lilly ice cream's the very best buy. Ice cream, Meller, and sherbet too. Lilly ice cream for me and you. Say, when you go to the grocery store with Mom, be sure that you buy Lilly. And let me show you the Lilly flavor of the month. It's right in keeping with the season, a delicious flavor blend. It's Lilly Dutch Apple. As you can see, it tastes like pie, so give it a try. You'll enjoy the delicious blend of Lilly vanilla ice cream with Dutch apples. Mom will like it, and Dad will especially like it too. Be sure that you look for the half-gallon carton when you go to the grocery store with Mom. You can buy it in either ice cream or in Mellerin. It's Lilly Dutch Apple, a real dairy treat by Lilly. So be sure and put it on Mom's grocery shopping list. And be sure that you keep your eye out for it when you go to the grocery store with her. It's Lilly Dutch Apple ice cream. Oh, Lilly, Lilly ice cream, the very best buy. Ice cream, Meller, and sherbet too. Lilly ice cream for me and you.
But Lilly ice cream had its own jingle, and we would work the jingles into the commercials. And so the commercials are really a part of the show.
Boys and girls, have Mom and Dad take you to Georgie's Chef at 28th and Franklin. Enjoy a delicious meal and get free a menu with my picture on the back, plus a gold coin filled with bubble gum. Remember the name, Georgie's Chef.
In being involved in the community, we helped with the March of Dimes. We had a map that we put on a big easel. It was a big map. And we traced a trail from Elihu's house to Happy House. And this trail went through several different locations. It went through High Price's general store, went through Young Wes's ranch, went through Possum Country, went through around Punk's Pike, not Pikes Peak, but Punk's Pike. Then it went across a rickety bridge, and it went by the not-so-grand canyon. And so we placed dimes along this trail as they would send them in, and finally the trail wound up with Happy House. And then we donated all of those dimes, of course, with all the others that we had received, many more than we needed for the map, but we donated those to the March of Dimes. And we had the chairman come out and accept that map and the donations from the show. And so we did various things in the community. We had an ice show come into town, and we did a remote from the Central Texas Coliseum, if that's what it was called. But there's one right across the street from the KWTX studio. And I remember they put Elihu inside a line of barrels, and this ice skater came around at high speed, and Elihu was advised to duck just in time, which he did, and the ice skater went over the barrels and Uncle Elihu. So we did some things like that that were rather fun. We had one day at Kittyland, which is right down the street on Bosque Boulevard. and we had free rides and free drinks and sponsor prizes and all of that. And we drew, it was estimated about 9,000 people, and 6,000 of those were kids. So we had an afternoon of real fun at Kittyland. And those were the things that we did to keep the show going.
We went to the big theater in Fort Hood one Saturday morning, and we filled it. And you know, we were really surprised. I think this theater would hold 600-700 people. And here we was over there on a Saturday morning. We had a little portable set that was just like the set we used on the air. We went over there, and I know that thing was full, and we did about an hour. I think we did about an hour, and folks just loved it. I mean, they loved it, and we were surprised at the amount of people that had showed up.
Noticing the fact that one night on the way to a public appearance, personal appearance, Bob is driving, has on the Elihu sideburns, doesn't have the mustache or the hat on or the glasses because they're pretend glasses. And I said, Bob, when we do so-and-so tonight, Bob, Wes, who was always quicker on the uptake than me, said, what's the plan tonight, Elihu?
Oh, well, fellows, we're gonna...
Because once Bob was even in partial makeup, he never left the character. He was not ever going to take the chance of some little kid being disillusioned by hearing the wrong voice come out of Elihu. He stayed in character forever.
After a while, we were becoming thin on script. We didn't have a staff writing what we were doing. We were ad-libbing everything that we did with a very basic outline to go on. And so finally, I determined, well, Elihu either has to move to another community or we're going to have to take the show off the air. And the latter is what we chose to do. So we concluded the Elihu show on one afternoon, and it was kind of a sad day for all, but those things happen, especially in TV and in radio.
The whole experience was something that I'm just not, I'm never going to forget it. And I know these guys won't either. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.
So until tomorrow, this is
P.J. Possum
and
Young Wes
and Uncle Elihu saying, see you in the funny papers. Well, let's say thank you to this Waco crew for coming down to film this interview.
That was very lovely. Thank you.
Yes, we have with us, we have Larry Hosey, and we have Mark Randolph. And the two of them have come down to help us put on this show.
They've put us on film or tape.
We appreciate that. And I want to say in passing, I appreciate Bryce driving 300 miles.
I must be exhausted.
For that. And Young Wes driving 200 miles for this.
So did Larry.
And so, yeah, and Larry Hosey driving 200 miles.
Larry's important.
And Tim, my son, drove 200 miles.
Yay for Tim.
So we appreciate all of that. And please give our thanks to the city of Waco for allowing you to come down and do this.
And if we've left anybody out, we're covered with room. Messy stuff, that.